Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Thanks very much for joining me on my Desert Island Books. You had quite a collection of amazing sci-fi books that have rather tested my sci-fi knowledge. So thank you for suggesting them.
Yeah.
And I think you've brought a few along with you today, haven't you?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah? Do you want to start with your first? What's your first one?
Probably Skullduggery Peasant.
Do you want to put it up? Ooh. And what's that one about?
It's about so they have to kill, well, not kill, but they have to defeat another dimension.
Huh. And Skullduggery is he is a sort of detective, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he has someone who, a sort of protege who he's sort of teaching.
Yeah.
And what do they do you have is he your favorite character in the story?
Probably Skullduggery.
Why?
Probably the humor that he has.
Okay. He's sort of, they have to, his protege is called Valkyrie, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have to stop evil forces threatening the world.
Yeah.
So do they travel quite a lot in the story? Or what are sort of the evil forces they come against?
They travel quite a lot. Not too much, but they really travel mainly around Britain, but not around like the whole world.
Okay, and what sort of evil forces are they fighting against?
Just evil forces, really.
Okay. Are there any that are were particularly scary to you?
The main one is in this one, which is the other dimension. And they have to destroy their leader called Malevolent.
Malevolent, that's sort of quite a well-known evil character name. It's used in quite a lot of stories, I think.
Yeah.
But it all turns out all right in the end. That's good.
Well, not everything is all right, but yeah, ends on quite a cliffhanger.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe there'll be another story coming sometime.
Yeah.
Well, I've brought a few of mine as well. I'm starting with a complete change from sci-fi. It's a picture book called Where the Wild Things Are, but it's kind of, well, it's not really linked to sci-fi, but it's got these. It's a sort of classic. It's 1960s, I think, and it's a classic of these creatures and about this boy who's fed up being told to go to his bedroom, and so he kind of imagines that he's transported away, and because none of us can go anywhere, I think imagining's quite good at the moment. And then he comes across these monsters, and he has to he tames them by just staring. You know, you sometimes have those staring competitions at school, or I used to, when you had to stare at someone and then the person who blinked first lost. Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the same idea, and he just stares and stares, and then they eventually lose, and they're under his control. And it's a really good story. It is a picture book, but you can take a lot from it, and the pictures are amazing, so you can read a lot into them too. So I recommend it. What's your next book?
Probably The Martian.
Yeah, this is the only one out of all of yours that I did kind of recognize. What's it about?
It's about someone who's stranded on Mars and he can't contact NASA.
Hence the name, I guess.
Yeah. So what happened was, there was an expedition for a camp to be set up on Mars for around a month. But then a sandstorm was on Mars and it blew up the place, and one of them was thought to be dead. So the rest of the crew left without them. when he woke up, he was still alive, and he had to try and survive on Mars. He had to try and contact NASA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's quite, I remember you saying the chance of him being able to get back, because the spaceship goes back to collect him, doesn't it? And the chance of him being able to get back onto the spaceship is really slim, because you said the spaceship can't actually land on Mars.
Yeah. But he also has to contact NASA before he had to contact NASA, but to tell them that he had to. And there was many things going on before that.
And he kind of creates his own life on Mars, doesn't he? He starts growing food and sort of living, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Creates his own world.
Yeah.
Kind of quite cool.
Yeah, it is. There's also a film.
Yeah, I've seen the film. But it can't be based on any kind of reality, because as you said, what was it you said to me when I asked if it was real?
No one's ever been to Mars, so.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe you could make it your mission in life to be the first person to go. You never know.
Yeah.
I think your interest in sci-fi books is a good step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. Watch this space. Well, that sounds like a very good, interesting book. My next book is, which one should I do? Whispers in the Graveyard. I think you'd actually really like this. It's about this boy called Solomon who's really dyslexic, and he gets really bullied at school and no one's nice to him. And he ends up having to go into this sort of baby class. He's about, he must be about sort of 12, and he has to go right down to sort of year 1, so 5, 6-year-olds. And then there he befriends this little girl called Amy, and the teacher is really nice to him too. And there are these builders who are digging up this tree in the graveyard, and it sort of releases these otherworldly powers. And I don't want to sort of spoil the whole story, but this sort of force draws Amy and Solomon to it, and it can kill people by sort of dragging them down into the abyss of where they're digging. And it's just a really good story. And as my parents live right next to a graveyard here, it's kind of quite relevant to me. But it's just a really, really well written and interesting story.
Yeah.
I recommend. What's your next one?
Probably the Spook series.
Ooh, what's that about?
It's basically about a boy, not a boy, more of a teenager, and his parents have signed him up, since they're quite poor, to a man who's hiring. He pays decently, but it's a very dangerous job, and no one really knows much about it. And what they do is they just try and solve certain different mysteries, but like ones like things to do with spirits and witches, and it's rather creepy.
Okay, it's a TV series as well, isn't it?
I'm not sure. I've never heard of it as a TV series.
And it's about is it about Tom Ward? Is he the main boy? And he's sort of the 7th son of a 7th son, and then he's apprentice to someone.
Yeah, he's the apprentice of the Spook.
Oh, is it Gregory?
Yeah, it is.
And then Gregory's a sort of master fighter of superpowers, and then he's being trained up, but most of the other apprentices have died through various things.
All of the other apprentices have either died or they've just been trapped somewhere and they can't get out.
Trapped. Ooh. And does Tom Ward gradually realise this?
No, he's told.
He's told. That would be pretty scary.
Yeah.
But maybe it makes him fight and want to learn even harder so he doesn't die.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that sounds like a really interesting. And there are quite a lot in the series, aren't there? It's quite a big series of books. Well, that sounds very interesting.
There are 15 to 14 books in the series.
Oh my goodness. How on earth does someone have enough imagination to write that many stories?
Yeah.
Does it all end all right in the end?
I haven't finished the whole series. Not yet, but I want to.
Well, it sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
How many have you read so far?
I've read around 3.
So quite a lot more to go.
Yeah.
Well, plenty of time to read at the moment, so that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a next one called, it's another picture book, called The Day of Ahmed's Secret. And it seems pretty simple, but you can sort of read a lot out of it. That it's about this boy called Ahmed, and the whole story focuses around that he has a secret to tell his family, and you don't know what it is until the end. And I'm not going to tell you what the secret is, but it's really good. And it's sort of, he's in an Arabic country, Cairo. He's in Egypt, and it's sort of and you can read into a lot about the fact that why his job is to travel around and collect bottle, or to pull this donkey who's got bottles on its, can you see? Yeah, got bottles on its trailer. And then it sort of talks about why he is doing that, and why because he should really be at school. And so it sort of looks at how difficult life is for them. It sort of shows you a normal day for him, and then you can kind of compare that to how a normal day for you or for other people over here would be. It's fuel. Look, he takes fuel to people's houses. And so it's so much more than just the secret of what he's going to share with his family at the end. It deals with loads of different issues as well, which I think is really clever.
Yeah.
So it's a book you can really look at and study and get a lot out of.
Yeah.
What's your next book?
I've only got 2 left, but it's probably going to be Hive.
What's that about?
It's about this academy for villains almost, and it's a bit like Artemis Fowl. It's a bit like it, but not exactly like it. But it's basically about this school which teaches villains, and in most of the books, it's usually there's this board of villains, which isn't called Hive, it's just a board of villains which just commit crimes, and but throughout the whole series, basically about this one person who, at the end of the series, it tells you what's been happening over all the books and why they're so different from the first one. And I don't want to spoil it because otherwise it'll give away a lot.
Okay, do you know what Hive stands for in its title?
I used to, but not anymore.
I think it's Higher Institute of Villainous Education.
Yeah, that's it.
And because it's training children have to be sort of villains, so they're being trained to be criminal masterminds, and so they have to sort of show a villainous streak, I guess, before they can start being trained.
Yeah.
So that's I thought that was a bit of a slightly spooky beginning for the story.
Yeah.
And how do you think they know whether someone has a villainous mind or not? I was wondering, because how can you tell?
So they so basically if they like commit a rather large crime, but no one knows who it is, and then they monitor and they figure out who it is, because most of them
Ah.
can't figure it out.
And then they get trained to sort of commit even worse crimes,
And
I
then they
guess.
go and capture them. They don't like say come with us. They usually drug them and then take them to the island.
Ah, wow. Well, I think it's sort of a really interesting concept. I'm quite glad they don't have such a thing in the real world. Or it would be nice to have a sort of hive, but not for villainous education, a hive for sort of creative education. I guess that would be hike rather than hive. But it's a clever idea.
Yeah.
Interesting book. What's your final book?
It's the Gone series. Series.
What are they about?
They're about this little town just off the coast, and it's put in a bubble by this. Well, I'm not going to say what it is because it'll spoil the story. But then it's basically this bubble, and no people who are 18 or over, I think it's 18, but either 18 or over, they just disappear, and no one knows where they go, and they need to try and survive in that bubble. And at the beginning, there's quite a lot of just people just messing around, nothing's really happening. People are taking care of their children. But then towards the end, when food's running low and people start developing mutations or powers, you could say, there start to become riots and a few people start dying, but no one really wants to die because no one knows where they go, and also no one knows what happens when you poof.
Oh, explain the poof.
Basically, it's when you turn 18 or over, and then you just poof. You just disappear.
Ah, so they're only safe in this bubble, and while they're sort of under 18.
They don't. Yeah, so they're staying there, but yeah, they're in there and they're just trying to survive.
Right. And so it's sort of, they create their own sort of hierarchy, don't they, of their own leader and their own sort of way of life.
Yeah.
And do they grow their own vegetables and things? How do they eat?
That's what the second book, Hunger, is about. It's how they've run out of food and they need to find a way, and they're mutating, man-eating worms, stopping them from planting stuff.
Oh. Gosh, so they're really it's really testing them.
Yeah.
And what happens, this bubble, how do they stop people sort of transgressing between the two worlds?
It just won't let you. As soon as you touch it, you either get electrocuted, or there's an explosion, or something happens to you and you get flung away from it. And it's also like a solid. You can't break it open.
Oh. Or you... go on.
And it isn't a bubble, it's more of a humongous wall, and there's no chance anyone could fly over it.
Right. Wow. That sounds really scary concept.
Yeah.
And how do they get all the children in the bubble in the first place? Do they sort of ship them over from different parts of the country?
No, it's just a small little town.
So it's only the people in that little town who are in the bubble?
People just showed up and everyone was in the bubble, if they were 18, if they were 17 or younger.
Ah. Well, it kind of feels like we're all in our own private little bubbles at the moment, doesn't it? Although not quite so extreme.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That sounds like a really interesting story too.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing all your wonderful stories, Alex. Do you have if you could be any fictional character, do you have one that you would like to be?
Probably Skullduggery Pleasant, or the The Martian, the person in The Martian.
Oh yeah, why would you be one of those two?
So the person with The Martian, he's just rather clever and rather cool. And in Skullduggery Pleasant, probably Skullduggery because he's just quite humour. He's quite funny.
Well, that's a good reason to be someone. And he's quite a influential person, Skullduggery Pleasant, as well, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's also
Has the power to do a lot.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Oh, and I've got one fact before we finish, that the former American president, Theodore Roosevelt, read one book every single day, apparently.
Wow.
Because it reduces stress and helps depression, and it's a good practice to do. So I'm going to try and read one book every day from now on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much, Alex.
Yeah.
You were really interesting in all your book choices, and I haven't read any of them, so lots to read and choose from. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.